on behalf of the Seattle Asian American Film Festival, I would like to welcome some of our filmmakers from our not so new normal program. So thank you so much for sharing your films and joining us for a conversation. Just to start, I'm hoping we can all do some introductions. And so I was wondering if everyone could go around and just say your name, the film you worked on, and where you are joining from. And as I'm giving everyone a moment to think, I'll introduce myself. My name is Yaoyao. I'm the volunteer manager at SAAFF, and I'm calling from Seattle. Anyone else like to go next?
I could go next. Hi, I'm King. I'm originally from Malaysia. I'm staying in San Francisco now. I'm the director, animator, editor for the short documentary called Yellow.
Great, nice to meet you.
I can go next. I'm Tiffany. I'm calling in from Brooklyn, New York, and I worked on Exhausted.
Hi, my name is Will Kim. I am a director of an experimental documentary short, Where Are You Really From? And I'm calling in from Los Angeles.
Yeah, sorry for jumping on a little late.
Oh, no worries.
I'm Yu. I am the writer, director, and actor in Invited In. Currently, it's been quite a travel whirlwind at the moment, but I'm currently calling in from Japan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great, thanks for making the time to be here during such a busy time. Great, well, thank you so much for making the time to be here for a Q&A today. And I have a few kind of prepared questions for everyone, but feel free to speak up, ask each other questions, and really free-flowing conversation. So the first, and if you all wouldn't mind going around again, was just what inspired you to make this film, or how did you get involved in this project?
Right, so just living here in the States as an Asian American, and a lot of unnecessary racist comments that I've been hearing and experiencing, throughout my life, and that's something that many of us kind of live with, or have been living with. But so I thought at some point I needed to make a film about it. But the reason. Recently, I remember I was doing some kind of repair work in the house. We called in somebody for the bathroom tile repair, and somehow the person was curious about where I was from. Somehow, so then obviously, then Los Angeles, and then the person has to always ask a follow-up question like, no, I mean, where are you really from? And so, that really annoys me. And so I just kind of decided to make a film, like an experimental documentary in a way, like collage of all the, racist slurs and, so many things I've been hearing. So the film doesn't have a narrative structure to it, but it's kind of a, collage of my experiences, it kind of in an experimental way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, sort of where that was coming from.
So as I was saying, so when I first filmed the footage for Exhausted, I did not intend at all to make a film. And it's also interesting because I actually didn't even start my current documentary program until after. So again, truly did not have any intentions, but truly the motivation for it was that it was the same night that I had literally heard about the Atlanta spa shootings. And I just felt so much exhaustion, truly, that hit me from being in isolation, living totally alone for a whole year, and then hearing about all these attacks. And then for that to have happened, it was just so much. And for some reason, I just felt like I needed to document how I was feeling that night. Because I am a documentary filmmaker, it makes sense that I was I need to just like I didn't even know what I was planning on doing with the footage, if anyone would ever even see it, but there was just something about like this night is just not right. Like this atmosphere is something about like maybe in like a couple of years or who knows what, like this might resonate with somebody else, but like I take my makeup off every night and it's also not even a fun process. Like I've been wearing eyeliner since like 6th grade or 4th grade maybe every day, and it's not necessarily something that I even like want to do. And I think I touch on it in the film that it has to do with kind of this like Asian woman trying to play into white traditional beauty standards. And then we are over sexualized and unfortunate tragedies like this happen. And that's kind of part of what the film is about. But it was just like something about that night taking my makeup off that truly felt like there's a lot of grief mixed into this, and it just felt like so much more than what I was just doing of just wiping. So that's kind of what it was. But I think also the quotes at the end really struck me because I feel like we were all really individually grieving and we couldn't even see each other because we were, in lockdown still. So really the only way I could see if people cared was either like text messages or Instagram stories. And I felt like people moved on from the event so fast. And I think that quote that's at the end from Stephen Yun that says something like, I always wonder, like, Asian Americans think so much and care so much about other people, like who is looking out for us at the end of the day? I think about that a lot still.
Yeah, definitely. Really appreciate you sharing, in both of you have shared so far, just the vulnerable place that these works came from. And I wonder too, going to your point about this like individually experienced moment, if we might shift, thinking about your short and maybe some of the inspiration for that there. I think about, being in isolation, being in quarantine, kind of those experiences.
Yeah, actually, Tiffany, a lot of what you said really resonated with the project Invited In. I consider myself primarily an actor. I think that was like my bread and butter. And so I've always been interested in directing and writing, but I think there is somewhat of this like belief that I really had when I was in New York and I was there for 5 years that about like taking up space and taking up ownership. And I had a really hard time feeling like I could try and expand. And I think that's just something culturally that I was always struggling with of like, oh, like I need to stay in my lane because, everybody else is also just taking up space. Like, who am I to be trying all these different things when I've never, studied directing? I'm not a writer. Like, I would tell myself these things. And strangely enough, it was when I had to go back to Hong Kong because my student visa ended. And also COVID was happening. So it was sort of this crazy time in my life. And to be immediately forced into a 2-week isolation, which was, I would like to say this is like phase 1 of COVID, when we were still, wiping down fruits and our countertops and all that. But when I was in Hong Kong, the first thing I had to do was go into isolation for quarantine. And it was so drastic, going from the COVID world that we knew then, which was already isolating enough, to literally being confined in a room where you can't leave. People only can contact you through, social media messages. And it was such a strange sort of experience, which really helped me be introspective. And it was really the birthplace for Invited In. So it centers around these 2 young girls who experience the COVID world in very different ways. Annie is very isolated. She's always been isolated, but she's not exactly in quarantine. She's, just at home. And Emmy is in quarantine and she is connecting with her friends and her followers and her family through social media. And so the inspiration really was about how we use technology in this sort of weird, global pandemic we live in, but also what it means to be authentically yourself. which I still struggle with all the time. I don't really, I think that's the journey everyone is taking. But the most exciting thing, I think, was the incorporation of tech and how we can sort of really not capitalize, but relate to one another. We didn't know what Zoom was, and then a month later, everybody and their grandmothers knew how to use Zoom, which I thought was quite wonderful. So Invited In was really a birthplace for many different topics that I wanted to explore.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that and kind of making those connections too to tech and like all these new things, that we had to grapple with. And then I guess, lastly, King, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about the inspiration for your film, or just getting involved in it in general.
Yeah, for sure. So Yellow, it's about my friend's story. So she's Michelle, and then it was like one night we had like our Zoom like friends like chat, and then she's like, "Hey, there's something really heavy on my heart. Can I share this?" And then so she wrote like a journal entry, and then she like shared it to the group, and I just remember like trying to like not cry in front of everyone because I was so touched by her story. And I remember like months later, the story still like haunted me. And then I told her that, hey, like, can I actually make this into a short documentary? And then just remember like her response was like, no, I don't feel like this is like a thing I could like share to the world. But I feel like I shared with her like what I had in mind, like some illustrations, some like concept art that I did. I said, hey, like I feel like we have like something. It'd be cool if I have your blessing. And then yeah, so like she wrote the thing again, and then she did the voiceover, and then yeah, so it was might be one of the most beautiful collab that I've done. Yeah, and that like happened 2 years ago, so it's still, it's kind of strange that like the theme still like rings true like nowadays. It's like it's kind of sad.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that the full title for this film program is Not So New Normal, COVID shorts, series 2, to, get across how ongoing this has all been. Yeah. And I guess, oh, sorry, Tiffany.
I was gonna say, King, I actually really appreciate your comment there, because similarly, if you think about it, like Exhausted was made in March 2021, and it feels like this past year has felt so much longer than 365 days, right?
Yeah.
And also it's like, now that I'm in school and I know more about production and stuff, I'm like, what really was this little short? Like, is it like festival quality and all of that? But then the sad thing is, like, we know recently what happened with Michelle, and that was heartbreaking. And I think it reminded me that these attacks they have not stopped. Like, this was not a March 2021 thing, or like phase one of the pandemic. And I think it's just a good reminder that these quotes and these themes of like what we're all exploring here, yeah, they're still ongoing, and maybe for even years after. But yeah,
it's very true.
Yeah.
I mean, and to Will's point, for years before too, I've been being asked where am I really from for my whole life. So
yeah,
both directions. Yeah. I guess, thinking about, these are definitely heavier topics that all of your films are grappling with, these ideas of isolation, personal struggle, reactions to discrimination. And so, thinking about our audiences, maybe what would you want viewers to take away from your projects?
I think I'm happy to kick this off. I would think that my film is, it explores a younger audience. I think it is universal in the sense that these are feelings that we could all really relate to. But ultimately, it's centered around these two young girls who are going through the changes that we all did. And I've been fortunate enough to show it to that specific target audience, and they all sort of came out of it being like, what happens at the end? And they kept asking me like, is there an ending to it? To which I knew the ending too. I knew what happens to the characters afterwards, but I think it's more about the question of, giving people the opportunity to make choices for themselves. Especially when everything is so volatile at the moment. I've been finding it much more, I would say, like, I've been trying to show more empathy and sympathy to people without prejudging whatever they're going through. And in doing so, I feel like it's created a safer environment to have sort of open conversations to see difference. And also, part of that is understanding intentionality. I think really I would like to see the best in people and see that, the world isn't necessarily as horrible as we have been seeing. And I would like to believe that there is so much more hope and growth for people. And so I think with Invited In, it's always about choice. What is your choice? And it's not my place to judge your choice, but I would wish that everybody really thought about their choices, especially in this day and age.
So I'll go real quick. So what do I want the audience to get out of my film? I think that, whether they're Asians or non-Asians, whatever comments or things that they say, a lot of time the intention is not bad, so that's why I said at the end of the film, we don't want to cancel anyone, but what we want to cancel is the systemic racism. And so, so when people see all these comments that I've been receiving repeatedly, over my throughout my life, I just hope that they know that I acknowledge that maybe some of them are trying to be friendly, or some of them really want to know about you, or there could be many different positive intentions, but people need to know that what's wrong, and what's wrong is what's wrong, and there's that ignorance that's rooted in the kind of comments. So I just hope people realize that, and just kind of be more sensitive and more cautious when you say such words, right, to other people. So
yeah, I really appreciate from both of your responses so far the sense of like, it's not as, right and wrong, black and white as something might seem initially. Yeah. And then Tiffany or King, any thoughts on?
Yeah, I could go. Actually, I think Michelle said it pretty well, like in the story. I really love the part where she wrote about how like the kids kind of just like do whatever the adults do. So I think it's important that we show the kids how we like show up to the world, like how we like face the virus, how we like face people that have like that just like look different than us. And like one pretty cool observation that I did, it's like when I show this film to like my Asian friends, they would get it like within like the first like 10 seconds when like the mom was like staring at Michelle, they would know that it's like, oh, it's like they get judged by like the color of their skin. But when I show it to like some of my non-Asian friends, they're like, so who's Michelle? Like, why is she like, why are they like reacting that way to her? So I think it's like kind of interesting that like how audience can like take different things from like the same experience. And then I think it's kind of cool that like us as the filmmakers, we get to like come in and say, hey, like this is what like some people in the world are experiencing, and it's like maybe it's kind of cool for you to like maybe step in their shoes and then maybe like feel how they feel. And I think just to create conversations, I think that's important with what we're trying to do as filmmakers. Yeah.
I think to sum up, like I think I would say, sorry, To sum up with what all three of you said, because I think there's a lot of interesting themes, I would say similarly with Exhausted, it's about checking in with people, checking in when you overhear somebody, even if it's a stranger and they got some kind of question, like Will is bringing up, that's happened on the subway for me. Like I've seen somebody like, I don't know, something concerning, whether they're Asian or not, and I don't know them at all, but I'm just like, hey, are you all right? Like it takes a second to check in, or in these unfortunate situations, like sending a message, even when especially now when we're all isolated. And I think personally, like staying silent in these situations hurts more because it feels like nobody cares. It feels like you are alone, your anxiety or your thoughts you're overreacting or something, or like it's just you, like can't you get over it? So I think it's important, especially for us Asian Americans, to talk about it with each other. And I know that there's like such a culture, I feel like, where we've been brought up by our parents to like not make a fuss, like just keep your head down, like it's not, even at work, like if this happened the day before, like you can't be sad at work or something like that, but that's not the case. And I think especially now it helps to talk about it.
I mean, speaking for myself, I feel like watching all of your films gave me that sense of connection, even though, I have been working from home and have been fairly isolated for the past couple years. I hope, I'm guessing that's true for audience members as well who have just seen them now. And so now I'm going to kind of switch to maybe a production aspect of things in the next question, which is about what was the biggest change that happened in your project from kind of that first initial brainstorm or storyboarding all the way to the final cut?
I could go first. For my project, there's actually not like a big change. I think I'm a very good planner when it comes to like creating art. Like I make sure like I do like concept art, I like storyboard and everything. My youngest brother is actually the one that made music for me. And he's from Malaysia, so it's like an overseas like collab. And then like even like drew like a graph to tell him, say, hey, this is where the music's gonna swell. This is where like there's some dissonant notes gonna be here. So I don't think there's like any big changes to the whole thing. Yeah, if that answers your question.
No, that's totally great. I mean, really just hearing about process at all, I feel like is super, super interesting. So if anyone else want to share, but it doesn't have to be a change. Can maybe just even be like a lesson learned in the process, or yeah.
I'm quite a type A person, and I didn't realize that I would like directing so much as I did, because I think ultimately I'm very particular with the way that I like things done. But also I was learning a lot about just trusting the fact that like the people that you do end up collaborating with, like understanding that they know what they're doing. And the best thing is sometimes just let them do what they know how to do. And the wonderful thing I learned along the way was that in Hong Kong, especially, there's a very select few sort of groups of people that really end up doing filmmaking in Hong Kong. Primarily, it's like older men. And, recently Anne Hui started getting recognition for her work, but it only took her like decades for people to start, giving her the value that she has, which is really unfortunate. But it just happened to be that the people that I was able to collaborate with were women. And it was a really wonderful experience doing so, because I think we really created this environment of empowerment. And unbeknownst to us, like we weren't like trying to hype each other up, but I've seen and been in spaces and sets where like it was never about encouragement, but just about like who has the biggest, bravado or like how they want things done. But the way that Invited In worked, and worked so well, and I'm so fortunate, especially in such a weird COVID filming world that we sort of did, was that it was just about uplifting each other, and it felt so normal. And I don't know if it was because of the people that I got to work with, or if it was because we were all women. But I think in doing so, it really showed me that filmmaking doesn't always have to be grueling and tough and late night hours. Like sometimes it can really work to your advantage. And I think that's just about the people that you choose to work with.
I can go next. So it was basically one person, one film kind of. So I mean it's really short and kind of look at it as a like a moving collage of my sketches or paintings. So, and like I mentioned earlier, there's not much of a structure to the to this film. And so it was all animated with watercolor on watercolor paper individually, frame by frame. So it's kind of like, I imagine like a bunch of floating lips, like saying different things, and it morphs into a different shape. And, so I may have had a few concept sketches, but in making this kind of experimental documentary animated film, I don't really follow my boards. Sometimes I don't even have boards. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
no, I'm loving this range between all of your answers.
There was no collaboration. It was just me stuck in my room during the pandemic. My family had been out of town, so it was just me in my house. So
I relate a lot to Will because same, I was totally isolated alone. It was just me, my tripod, and my camera. And also similarly, like I said earlier, since I didn't intend for this to be a film, there wasn't like as much of a concept or anything to follow. Like actually it's interesting because I'm like scrubbing through right now and I'm remembering the process was like I filmed the footage, I put my camera away, and then I think like maybe the day later or a couple days later I looked back at what I had, and it wasn't like intended to be, because you know how the film plays, it's like backwards, but that's not how it was at all when I like sat down to edit at all. And I didn't even have the audio clip yet. I just like was looking up some stuff about the news and happened to find that audio. I mean, it's from a news report, a video on YouTube. And then I just thought that that clip specifically was very, I mean, I say touching, but also very heartbreaking to hear, because like, I think at that time I had read the posts, I had read the articles, but I don't think many of us had heard the actual clip of the phone call from inside the spa. And like that part to me was just, it took it to another level of feeling like this could have been this could have been my mom or like my friend's mom, or, and like that was a very scary moment. But yeah, I pulled that audio in, and then in listening to it was like, maybe this makes more sense to be like what if this was totally backwards? And I felt like the part where like the makeup comes back just lines up perfectly with the part where she mentions the over sexualization. And then I felt like I had to pull in those Instagram posts at the end to really drive home the point about how I was feeling.
Gosh, I'm not a filmmaker myself, so it's so interesting to hear from you, just like even thought processes and kind of, how that all fell into place from each of you. And I know that we're almost coming to our time, so my very last question for everyone is just, do you have any, anything you're working on right now? Could be filmmaking or otherwise, just getting a sense of, what's kind of going on now for all of you.
Yeah, so I'm actually in the process of writing my first feature film. It's going to be based in my hometown. It's Tawau in Malaysia. And it's kind of like a reflection on, I'm like exploring my father's story, because in a way we're like estranged, because like he's like separated from my mom, and what tough childhood, but yeah, I'm like trying to explore like what happened in his childhood, that made him like the way he is right now as a person. I just finished like act 2, so I'm like excited to work on like act 3 of the the thing. I don't know where it's gonna go, but I'm just like excited to like start writing like my first feature. Hopefully I get to shoot it in the future when I'm like rich and old and powerful. But yeah, that's the thing I'm working on.
I'll go next. So I'm working on another short animated, short documentary animation film about ocean warming, the impact of climate change in the ocean warming and the fish migrating up north, escaping the heat. So kind of documentary, kind of more visual experimental. So I'm in the pre-production of that film right now.
Well, as as you're saying, we're going to wrap up just before. I don't know if I personally loved all of your films. I think from each one of it, I could spew 1,000 things that I genuinely found so endearing. I think the hardest thing I did realize is we've all experienced these tiny paper cuts that really seem to sting with us, that also do carry us into the work that we continue to do moving forward. So thank you for, making the things that you did make. And I'm so glad that we got to share, this short time together. At the moment, I'm writing and doing a whole bunch of things, but I had a wonderful opportunity where I was actually just in Vancouver filming a pilot for HBO Max. So at the moment, sort of my eyes are back to acting and doing things like that, which is really great. And hopefully when that all unfolds, good things are to come.
That's so awesome. I can't wait to see that. So I'm also working on a short film and we're just getting into post-production. And it's part of like my program at the New School where I'm now a documentary studies student. And it's specifically about how we choose to live with grief and how we find comfort in grief, knowing that it changes who we are and what we can do. And I think originally I was wanting to make this film about pets, or like approach it from the angle of like, maybe I'll talk about grief through like people and the relationship they have with their pets, because maybe that's more approachable, right? Because talking about grief is taboo, kind of. But I decided, like, after researching more about not only pet loss, but just general grief that's been happening because of the pandemic, and realizing that like we're all in this state of collective grief, whether we think about it like that or not, we are. And I feel like it's at the forefront of a lot of our minds, but again, like we're not talking about it, similar to a lot of what this discussion was like. And so I'm hoping similarly that it'll help bring conversations about that.
It's been so wonderful, echoing you to speak with all of you and have you here today, especially to learn about, what's next on the horizon for everyone. So I will just kind of close out the Q&A session today by saying thank you so much, the audience, for joining the 10th Seattle Asian American Film Festival. We greatly appreciate your support for the festival and our community. If you have not done so already, please take a moment to fill out our festival participant survey. There's a link in your confirmation email. Data from the surveys help us get grants and sponsorships that make the festival possible. Also check out our other programs at seattleaaff.org. On behalf of the Seattle Asian American Film Festival, thank you so much.